This content is brought to you by iTrust Capital, which is a great platform that allows you to easily invest in crypto without worrying about taxes or fees. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in crypto through an individual retirement account or IRA. IRAs are tax sheltered accounts, which means all of your crypto is tax-free and can even grow tax-free over time. The process of signing up with iTrust Capital is very easy. They have a mobile app. They have 25 plus cryptocurrencies. They have full support, a dedicated team ready to help you. And it is free. And once again, 100% free to sign up with iTrust Capital. There are no hidden fees and there's no monthly subscription or membership. They also have great security. They utilize Coinbase custody for all their custodial services. So you don't have to worry. It is institutional grade crypto custody that they are using. This is a great platform. Once again, it is free to sign up. So visit the link in the description and go check it out. If you sign up with my link, you get a $100 funding bonus. So once again, check the link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is attorney John Deaton. John, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man. And I want to say thank you to you because I know that you have Joseph Grunfest coming up as well as others. And so keep doing what you're doing, brother. You're doing a great job.
Likewise, John. Obviously, you're representing myself and other XRP holders. So thank you so much. And I know you have a regular job. You have a business to run. So this is on the side on top of what you have to do every day.
Yeah. Well, it's very important what we're doing. So
for sure.
Thank you for having me.
So, John, obviously, there's been a lot of updates and there's a lot to go through. Let's start with what's the latest on the SEC Ripple lawsuit as far as updates on what are we waiting for?
All right, great question. I was hoping that we would have a little bit of breaking news for my interview here today because I believe any day now, and I'm a little surprised that it hasn't come down, would be the Judge Netburn rulings. But in essence, this is where we're at in the case to bring everybody up to speed. Fact discovery is concluded and expert discovery has concluded. What that means is that all the fact depots and expert depositions that are going to take place before a trial have all taken place. And I know that there were, 14 or 16, actually 16 experts, 8 for the SEC and 8 for Ripple. And all of those experts have been deposed. Now, normally, Tony, what happens at the end of the expert discovery, according to Judge Torres's local rules, within 2 weeks, there would be basically a request to have a hearing, which is a conference where they would set a scheduling for what's called Daubert motions, which would be a motion to challenge an expert witness's testimony, or summary judgment motions, which everybody's more familiar with. And that normally takes place, and I would normally expect to see that within 2 weeks from now. However, we have these discovery issues that we're waiting on from Judge Netburn, and basically, we're waiting on 2 things from her. We're waiting on her motion to reconsider her decision that the Hinman emails, which are 63 emails that have a draft of the Hinman speech contained in the email. She had declared that those were, in fact, not covered by the deliberative process privilege and must be turned over. The SEC filed a motion to reconsider. And she's now, reviewing that information, and she's either going to affirm her decision or she's going to reverse her position. But in addition to that, there was a meeting between Brad Garlinghouse and Elad Roisman when he was an SEC commissioner. That meeting took place in September of 2018. And basically, Elad's attorney is a fellow named Estabrook. He wrote notes of that meeting. And when he left on his last day, he found the notes and he notified the SEC, who notified Ripple. And basically the SEC claims that those notes are privileged. And so Brad Garlinghouse, his lawyers have moved for the judge to either say they're not privileged, or if they are privileged, to pierce the privilege and turn over the notes. Now, what's interesting about that is that the SEC has turned over notes of meetings between Brad Garlinghouse and Jay Clayton or Bill Hinman, because they think there's some helpful stuff in those. But these Easterbrook notes, they're not, which, according to Brad Garlinghouse and his attorneys and me, we believe that those notes corroborate Brad Garlinghouse's testimony. And that testimony is that, and what everybody needs to know is that, so we had Hinman's speech on June 14th, 2018, Bitcoin and ETH, good to go. Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz, they go to meet Clayton and Hinman in August of 18. And, you know, that's the meeting where Garlinghouse speaks out and says, Ripple's living in purgatory because of the lack of clarity. Mm-hmm. They don't tell them it's not a security or it is a security. They say, oh, well, keep talking to the staff and we'll deal with that another day. You know, tell us about your technology, right? And so apparently a month later, Brad Garlinghouse met with Elad Roisman. And according to Brad Garlinghouse, he left that meeting feeling very confident that XRP is not a security, right? In fact, I believe there was testimony that Elad Roisman said, you know, I'm sorry you even have to come to this meeting, right? That we even have to deal with this. So they believe that those notes from Estabrook will support Brad Garlinghouse's testimony that not only was he not told by Elad Roisman that XRP is a security, he was given the impression that it's not a security and that it's not viewed as a security. So those are very important pieces of evidence. How's that impact the case? Well, Tony, how do you write a summary judgment motion if you don't know what evidence you have or you don't have, right? Those meeting notes, the email, for example, in those 63 emails, Tony, what are the chances that one person typed a few words, what about XRP? One person. Did one person in these 63 emails say, well, how does this impact XRP? Or why wouldn't XRP be included? Are you including XRP? What is the analysis of XRP? You know, maybe someone wrote XRP is as decentralized as Ether. Maybe someone wrote XRP is a security. I don't know. But what are the chances that it was brought up? And if it was brought up and it's favorable to Ripple, they would need to be able to read those things, read the emails, read the comments, compare all the different draft speeches. What was changed? Was XRP in it before? Was it taken out? Was it not? And then write your summary judgment motion. And so we have to have these rulings. In addition to Judge Netburn, we have Judge Torres's decision on the SEC's motion to strike the fair notice defense and the motion to dismiss the case on behalf of Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson. Now, everyone wants to know, when are they going to come down, right? Here's what I think is good news. I think for sure it comes down this month, right? I think that the Judge Netburn rulings are going to be any day. And I think Judge Torres's rulings could be any day as well. But there's a rule in federal court, Tony, and it's called the 6-month list. And twice a year, the federal courts report to Congress any motions that have been pending longer than 6 months. A judge will have to declare, yeah, this motion has been on my desk for 9 months, a year, 10 months, 6 months, 7 months. And a lot of times judges don't want to report that, right? They just want to have to say that they don't have anything pending longer than 6 months. And so that list that 6-month list is issued at the end of this month. So there is a chance that Judge Torres would not want to report that she has these motions that have been pending for like 9 months or 10 months. And therefore, that could be another reason for her to issue a ruling. So I'm very confident that, worst case scenario, we'll get these decisions, near the end of this month. And then in April, we would likely have a conference for scheduling, for summary judgments and other motions. And then people will have a little bit more kind of certainty of how things are proceeding.
Wow. Man, there's so much happening on this in this case. And you talked about Elad Roisman, and he kind of abruptly stepped down at the end of February, I believe it was, or January, which is interesting. Do you think he kind of removed himself from this situation, given might be upcoming with him and Brad Garlinghouse meeting?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a really good chance commissioners don't, for them to testify at a trial would be very unusual and very exceptional. In fact, there could be even a rule that I'm not aware of that they're not allowed, because obviously it's like a husband and wife privilege. It's like an attorney-client privilege. The SEC could actually object to one of their commissioners testifying in a case, and they could invoke attorney-client privilege. They could invoke executive privilege. There could be all kinds of issues. So I don't think that him leaving has to do specifically with the case. I really can't speculate about why he left. I would imagine it's a frustrating job. I know that him and Hester Peirce have sort of been on this island, if you will, even with Jay Clayton, who apparently voted with the two Democrats, to bring this lawsuit, but also both Elad and Hester supported the safe harbor provision. And Jay Clayton obviously didn't. When we look back in time, as bad as Gary Gensler is, and I don't think there's anyone worse, quite frankly, as far as being anti-crypto, Jay Clayton had the majority, right? You had Hester Peirce and Elad Roisman and Jay Clayton under Donald Trump were the three Republicans, and Jay Clayton is the chairman. And the chairman may only get one vote, Tony, but the chairman dictates the policy. The chairman dictates the agenda. And if Jay Clayton could have easily, think about this for a minute, if we could go back in time and the three Republicans, Elad, Hester, and Jay, they vote for the safe harbor provision. And they say to these tokens, someone like Ripple even, you have these these markers that you need to meet in the next 3 to 5 years. If you meet these markers in the next 3 to 5 years, your token moving forward will be considered sufficiently decentralized, or whatever the terminology would be used, but you're not going to be considered a security. And that could have been done for at least, the major market cap coins, but instead that wasn't done. And look at what we are left with today. But just imagine that if there was an issue with Ripple, if it was the escrow, whatever it was, how about you sit down, you talk about innovation in this country, you want to foster it, but you want to make sure, that certain laws are complied with. And you sit there and say, listen, we think this and we think that, and you need to do this and you need to do that. Give some guidance. We wouldn't be in this position today. So I'm always going to probably look back at the Jay Clayton tenure and not only be frustrated about the conflicts and the appearances and the improprieties and going on CNBC and lying and all those things. I'm going to think about the lost opportunity that it was when he was there. But anyways, I know I got a little bit of a rant. I apologize.
No. You have a great perspective and obviously understand the legal workings of what's happening overall. This is a tough question to ask, and it may not be a fair question to ask, and it is speculating. Do you see a resolution this year? And as far as outcomes, do you see it a settlement, or something different?
I see a settlement. It's hard for me to imagine that it's not going to be settled. Everybody is in a rush, and I get that. Do I believe the settlement is going to be soon? If your definition of soon is 30 to 60 days, then no, I don't believe that it will be. I could be proven wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong, but I don't see that. I stand by what I've always said, which is, Tony, until the SEC has to settle, they have to have something that they're risking. It's very similar, and Jeremy Hogan and other lawyers who litigate will tell you this. My clients, right? I represent mesothelioma clients. That's the asbestos cancer. Yeah. Tony, 95% of those cases settle without ever seeing a courtroom or a jury. Of the 5% that start, 90% of them settle during the trial. But a company doesn't settle with me until they have to. I have to get a trial date, and the court has to hold it. When they have this hammer where they got to start paying a whole bunch of money to lawyers to represent them and defend them, right? And now there's a jury that's going to come in, and who knows what a jury could do. A jury could whack them for 5 to 10 million, right? When they have that kind of uncertainty, right, or risk, they settle. Same thing applies to the SEC. The SEC has not yet had to turn over those emails, has not yet had to turn over the Estabrook notes or any other kind of documents that have been contentious. So if Judge Netburn rules that the 63 Hinman emails and the Estabrook notes are going to be produced, I think the SEC will appeal it to Judge Torres, and that'll take several weeks. It'll be another several week delay, no doubt. And then if Judge Torres rules that those documents must be turned over, it's possible the SEC could think of like a writ of mandamus to the Second Circuit or some kind of appeal that could add another 30 days or another 6 weeks delay. But at some point, if they're faced with the reality, we have to turn over these documents, or the judge is going to come down with a ruling, and we believe, the SEC believes, that there's a really good chance she's going to find in favor of Ripple on the fair notice. And now they have something to lose, because every altcoin, if that decision comes down, it's going to impact Gary Gensler and the SEC's ability to regulate crypto. Every existing altcoin that's been, in existence for the last 5, 7, 8, 10 years would have a blueprint of victory against the SEC. XLM, Algo, all of them. Pick whatever one you want to pick. They would say, hey, all those arguments that Ripple won on, they apply to us too. Therefore, you're out of the crypto regulating business, Gary Gensler. That will cause him and the SEC to say, well, wait a minute. Do we want to be out of the crypto regulating business? No. Let's settle. And until there's that kind of impetus, right? That kind of catalyst, that kind of risk for them, I just don't think that they're inclined to settle. But I think that once they face that, and that clock's ticking where a ruling could be coming down from the judge on fair notice, or the briefs are written and there's an oral argument, and the SEC attorneys go to Gary Gensler and say, based on the judge's questioning, based on what XRP holders brief says, based on this, based on that, we think we're going to lose, Gary. Then Mary Joe White gets a phone call, and that phone call is like, okay, let's talk. I need, $50 million fine paid. You guys admit to some, early years where, XRP was a security in 2013 and ongoing and future sales, good to go. You guys can IPO, within 6 months after this settlement. Yes, I think that at that point in time, it really would only take 15 minutes to negotiate a fair settlement. You know what I mean?
Wow. There was a report from Eleanor Terrett of Fox Business earlier today. Obviously, this is not fully verified. It's a scoop that she put out that the SEC officials are not confident in the SEC winning this lawsuit. And even Hester Peirce has made some comments that the SEC may not get the outcome it's looking for. This seems to be along the lines of what you're discussing. Any thoughts on what Eleanor put out there this morning?
Yeah, I think when you take what Ellie put out this morning and you combine that with Gary Gensler's comments to Jon Stewart a few days ago, where all of a sudden he's like, you got to be willing to take some losses. All right. Which means it's become conscious, right? They're aware that things aren't going well. They're aware that they could lose the case outright. Here's the thing. They're not going to win that XRP itself is a token, is a per se security. They're not going to win that. All right. And the question is, can they win a victory by proving that specific sales made by Ripple on these specific days to these specific entities or people, whether those were unregistered securities? Maybe they can, maybe they can't. And so I think that it's what's happening. It's like you sort of believe in your case at first as a lawyer, right? You're digging it. You file the complaint. When they filed the complaint, they felt great, right? Well, it's a complaint. You get to put in all that self-serving shit, right? You get to say, oh, Brad Garlinghouse said this. He was wrong, even though he, sold some XRP, and they write it up like it's a fraud complaint, but they don't allege fraud. They believe in their case, if maybe. And then once you start litigating it and you start seeing those weaknesses coming out, then a realization sets in, which is, hey, this isn't going well. I mean, this realization, Tony, should have set in back in March of 2020 when Judge Ned Burns said to Jorge Tenreiro, well, according to you, what you just said, every person in the world selling XRP is violating Section 5 of the securities law, right? I don't know if you remember that, but the judge called them out. And at that moment in time, you think that the light bulb should have went off that said, hey, maybe our complaint is overbroad. Maybe our allegations are way too far-fetched and far-reaching. And maybe Ripple has some good points here. We did let it publicly trade for 7.5 years. We did allow them to buy 9% of MoneyGram, where they told us they were going to give MoneyGram XRP, and we allowed it. We allowed Coinbase to list it in 2019. We allowed this, we allowed that. I mean, I think that this realization that's setting in right now is starting to happen. Prosecutors are arrogant, brother. All right. I've been a prosecutor in my life. I've been a federal prosecutor. And I'm telling you, you're used to winning. And look at the SEC. They're used to winning. They're used to companies tapping out. It's like a rear naked choke, man. In the UFC, you're bleeding money and you're bleeding attorney's fees, and you just tap out and like, okay, I'll take the deal. And they picked the wrong fight. They picked the wrong fight because they picked, I think, the wrong company, and I think they picked the wrong community to go after.
Sure. And John, this may be my ignorance, but it's, and maybe, I don't know, it's my nature and the way I look at the world, but it's, I look at the SEC and I'm like, how could an agency like this which is supposed to represent fairness and protect retail investors and do the right thing, right? And they're funded by our tax dollars. And now it seems like it's rotten at its core. And once again, it may be because I'm a bit young and I haven't paid attention to these things for a long time, and I don't, I haven't been involved in anything with the SEC before. I didn't care, but now it affects me directly, and I'm like, how is this a government agency, and how is it operating like this with the potential conflicts of interest in these things that are happening?
Well, listen, I'm older than you, but I think that I'm with you in the sense that I think what's happened, Tony, is that at the SEC, there's been this revolving door that everybody knows, right? And it also happens in the other agencies. You go work for the FDA, you get hired by Pfizer, right? You go work for the SEC, you get hired by BlockFi, right? And so there's been this revolving door and everyone sort of accepts it, but they became too brazen. It got to the point where they didn't care about the conflicts or they minimized the conflicts. And I know that we're going to talk about your interview with, Joseph Hall from the SEC, and this whole thing. Well, that's just a conspiracy theory. It's almost like they don't want to be questioned. No, this isn't. This doesn't pass the smell test or the sight test or the taste test, right? Just like XRP doesn't pass the Howey test. I mean, it's insane that they just going to minimize it. The man collected $15 million from a firm that is a member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Its whole purpose is to promote all enterprise on the Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah.
Don't minimize that. Okay, say you didn't commit a crime, fine. Say you didn't, accept a bribe if you want, fine. But don't, that's not a big deal. That's a huge deal. And when we talk about it, I'll show you an email that, Empower uncovered that shows you how big of a deal this is. When Jay Clayton, his firm is Sullivan and Cromwell. The Ripple lawyers, in the questioning of Hinman, they say, and so did Chairman Clayton direct you, to contact Joe Lubin? And, the answer is, I don't remember that. Okay. But think about it. Jay Clayton from Sullivan Cromwell represents Joe Lubin and Consensus. And is there this communication of, take this meeting? So now you have Sullivan and Cromwell lawyers, and that's Jay Clayton's firm, his client, one of his firm's clients, are vested in Consensus and Ethereum. And we have Hinman vested with the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. Okay, that's not small conflicts. Right. When the Ethereum investors help write your speech that gives a free pass to Ethereum, and then you leave the SEC and you become a partner with them, that's not a small thing. Yeah. That's not something that you just trivialize, that you minimize, that you dismiss, say, that's just a conspiracy theory. Bullshit. It's not, man. That looks awful. And look what has happened to the public. Does the investing public have faith in the SEC? No. Absolutely not. Okay. And so, and they're never going to restore it if they keep minimizing these issues is what I'm getting at. And so but I think that it's never been called upon. It's been so accepted that it just keeps getting worse and worse. And they become a little more blatant. They become a little more blatant to the point where it's just, they don't give a shit, man. It's like, hey, this is what it is. It is what it is. You know what I mean? And until they get called out. And so that's what we're doing.
Well, they're getting called out in a big way right now. Obviously, before social media and the internet, it would have been hard to do this, but now people are rallying together. They can do it online and, of course, in person. And obviously, the online can feed the in person. But speaking of the interview with Joseph Hall, I know he was against this lawsuit, saying it doesn't make sense and so forth. But yes, he did dismiss the conflicts of interest as conspiracy theories. And I was actually surprised by that. And in a way, I thought about it after I interviewed him, as far as what could he have said. And then I realized his connections. Well, he said it on the interview that he's representing the folks at Grayscale and they're trying to get a Bitcoin ETF approved. So I think while I don't think he should have said that these things are conspiracy theories, because they're not, clearly. Right. I think he was also threading lightly. It seems, from my perspective.
No, listen. I think it's fair if Joe would have said, "Listen, and it's okay if he wants to throw in I know I've met Bill Hinman and I've met Jay and they seem like good guys and he wants to give them the benefit of the doubt. There's nothing wrong with that either, but don't dismiss something that does not pass any basics ethics test or question, right? And in fact, what I'd like to do is respectfully, I'd ask that Mr. Hall come back on with you and me, and let's discuss this very civilly. And because I don't think he can stand by that. If he said that because he doesn't want to burn bridges, fine. You don't have to be critical, but don't dismiss it like that. Don't dismiss us as these wild conspiracy theory people who are unhinged, who are trying to connect dots that can't be connected. That's not what this is. All right. I've spoken with ethics people. They look at this and they believe that there's an investigation that there could be serious repercussions. So, to give you an example, I know that you and I spoke beforehand. Could we bring up a couple of the emails? And just so your audience knows, I want to give credit to the right people. Jason Foster of Empower Oversight, in his litigation with the SEC, he was able to eventually get over 1,000 emails between Bill Hinman and Simpson Thatcher. And so here's one. And as you can see here, we're going to go through a couple real quick, but basically it says, you see where it says, it would be great if we could each buy ourselves lunch together sometimes. You see that? Mm-hmm. Right? What that's saying is that he can't buy Bill Hinman a lunch, right? He can't pay for it because of what? Because of a conflict issue. Right. It looks bad. It looks like he's favoring, decisions or something by Bill Hinman. So something as basic as eating lunch. If you go down, scroll down so you can see Bill Hinman's reply, he says basically, yes, it'd be great for ourselves to buy lunch sometimes. Interesting, Bill Hinman talks about this 1 year aspect, this first year. We don't know what they're talking about, but they're talking about something, specific that was before Bill Hinman. But let's move on to the second one. And I want to go down to where he talks about his tenure. And you see here, I have it circled where Bill Hinman says, the key themes for his tenure, I almost threw up when I read the word transparency, but it says increased collaboration. Well, we know that happened. Right? He certainly collaborated with a group of investors. But other than pointing that out, I want to go to the next one, because it's where the conflict interest stuff starts showing up. You see here this fella named Joshua Bonney, who is a partner at Simpson Thatcher. He throws out that there's going to be an ad hoc group meeting of Wall Street insiders, and they're going to meet once a month. And he wants Hinman to come to that meeting, right? That dinner of insiders in Wall Street. What law firms are there? I don't know. What executives from Wall Street are there? I don't know. We can imagine And as you can see, Bill Hinman responds to him and he says, both Jay and I would like to go to that ad hoc dinner. So, these are things that need to be flushed out. Who are at these dinners? We know they ended up going to a dinner of insiders in April, but let's move on, right? Because I want to show your focus here, where this Bonnie fella says to Bill Hinman, is there a headache for you coming to the ad hoc next month if folks from Simpson are there? We can sit out a month if it makes your life easier. Think about that, Tony. It's just dinner. It's just one meeting. It's one meeting. And what does Bill Hinman say? This is what I would say to your friend there from the SEC, right, that you interviewed, Joseph Hall, when he minimizes these conflict issues. What's Bill Hinman said? He says, our ethics folks were resisting my attending if Simpson Thatcher was going to be present. I don't like the idea of Simpson Thatcher having to miss the meeting because of me, but we can talk about it. It's just a meeting.
Right.
Yet the ethics office is concerned about the appearance of impropriety, the appearance of favoritism.
Yep.
Now, so when we say you collected $15 million from your law firm that's a member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance while at the SEC, and you gave ETH a free pass, that is not a conspiracy theory, Tony.
Right.
That is not a wild accusation from an unhinged Twitter lawyer such as myself, right? That's not what that is. That is what their ethics office, let's ask their ethics person who said, don't go to dinner together. I'd like to get that person on Thinking Crypto. Let's ask that person a question or two. What do you think about the 15 million, right? So I just wanted to point that out because when I saw the interview you did, and I give Joseph Hall credit, but I would say to him, you said to Tony in the interview, you said you were perplexed about why the SEC brought this case. Well, they won't tell us why they brought it. You are from the SEC, Mr. Hall, and you are perplexed. XRP holders are offering you a reason why that might unperplex you, right? This might explain it. And therefore, we need to make some inquiries about it. We don't dismiss it as wild conspiracy theories. And so that would be my response. But, this is just one small example. I would hope that, if you reach out to Mr. Hall, I obviously would be very professional and civil and all of those things. But I would love to have this discussion with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I will work on setting that up so we can certainly go through it. And to your point, these are facts. These are not stuff people made up. And clearly, like you said, their ethics person here is flagging this as a potential issue. So something was happening here. Obviously, we don't have all the full details, but clearly 15 million, he got paid $15 million while at the SEC, given Ethereum the free pass. And now the SEC is saying, no, he was the drunk uncle. Don't listen to him. He wasn't talking for all of us. It's ridiculous at this point.
No, you got that. But let's not forget you have, Jay Clayton in his a confirmation hearing with Senator Elizabeth Warren. He agrees that he should be recused if an enforcement action involves one of his clients. Senator Warren was concerned that Jay Clayton would vote not to have an action against one of his clients, right? Well, the opposite is also important to consider. If your law firm represents consensus and that law firm is a member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and your law firm is brokering the deal between Consensus and JP Morgan in the Quorum acquisition and the JP Morgan coin, which is a direct competition to Ripple and XRP, okay, then maybe you shouldn't vote. Maybe you shouldn't vote for an enforcement action against your client's competitor. That's another conflict, right? Massive, massive conflict that can't just be, thrown under the carpet, right? Or, oh, that's nothing. That's no big deal, right? If dinner is a big deal, right? If having dinner is a big deal, then this is a big deal. Matter of fact, in one of those other emails, Tony, they talk about, well, we don't have to sit at the same table, right?
Wow.
Like they're going to avoid each other. I'm just saying, you have to go through it all, brother. I'm just saying that I would encourage people to read them. They're on, by the way, they're on Crypto Law's site. So if people want to review them themselves, they can find them on the Crypto Law site.
So this is it right here, right?
Yeah. Buy yourself lunch while you're sitting at the same table as me, also buying myself lunch.
Wow.
Right?
All this for lunch. John, oh man, I've been doing lunch wrong all my life.
I mean, but that's the whole point, right? Like I'm not gonna, I'll sit at the same table, but you got to pay for your own lunch because I don't want someone accusing me of whining and dining you at an expensive lunch when one of my clients is going to have some kind of regulatory, issue with the SEC. If there's some kind of, they're seeking some kind of approval from the SEC and they're meeting, well, I'm not going to buy you lunch because it'll look bad. All right. Well, there's a lot that looks a lot worse than bad here.
Yeah.
Like I said, these conflicts of interest and these improprieties, these appearances are so gross and they're so massive that a basic ethics instructor in law school would tell you, this is no, there's something wrong here. You don't do this. You don't do this. That looks awful. And there's a famous Supreme Court justice, I forget the name, but he said that that when the appearance of impropriety rises so high that it destroys the public's confidence in the agency, then actual impropriety has actually occurred, right? Because if the public's confidence is destroyed, does it really matter whether or not there's the smoking gun and we can prove a bribery? If everyone thinks there's bribery going on, even if you can't prove it, is that good for the SEC? And so what I would say to Mr. Hall and everyone else, what I'm saying to Congressman Davidson and I'm saying to senators is that let's have an investigation, right? Let's just let an independent U.S. attorney investigate these conflicts and these improprieties. And whatever happens, happens. And if it ultimately is determined that no law was broken, okay, no law was broken. We can have confidence now because it's been investigated properly. There's no doubt in my mind that even if there's no criminal law that was broken, I guarantee you in the recommendations section of the investigative report is going to say this should have been avoided. If Gary Gensler, Tony, and Jay Clayton and Bill Hinman and Hester Peirce and everyone else at the SEC says, we don't comment on individual tokens. We don't comment on specific projects. And Bill Hinman's speech was his personal opinion only, then why did he give the speech?
And why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't Jay Clayton, his superior, stop him?
Right. Why did you give it? Right. No one will talk. Why did you talk about Ether that day? And until someone says, this is why I talked about Ether that day. And this is why I gave Ether free pass that day. Until someone explains it and offers an alternate, logical, reasonable explanation, those conflicts and those appearances appear to be the reason.
Yeah.
Prove us otherwise.
Now, you mentioned Empower oversight. and Jason Foster and the work they've been doing. I found it interesting that the SEC couldn't find anything until a lawsuit was handed to them. Well, wasn't that convenient?
Yeah, it's just another example where, Hinman's email talked about transparency. Jay Clayton talked about transparency. Gary Gensler talks about it, but no one practices it. What is the harm? Like, Tony, shouldn't the truth matter? Like, listen, I'm a lawyer. I litigate cases. I've been trying cases for 2 decades, man. And, but at some point, the truth should come out, right? The truth should matter. So, for example, if the Estabrook notes, if Elad Roisman told Brad Garlinghouse, I don't think XRP is a security, and I don't think that, the SEC can prove it's a security, then that's what he said. Let it come out, right? If Ripple sold an unregistered security in 2013 to 2015, hold them accountable. That doesn't offend me, right? Hold them accountable. If ETH held an ICO, which they did, hold them accountable. But this nonsense of, well, we're going to attack the token. We're going to throw XRP holders under the bus. We're going to completely destroy, individual investors and come up with some concocted theory that the token itself in the secondary market, that's also an investment contract with Ripple, retroactive 8 years. And you're just going to destroy people's lives and their investments and their livelihood. It's disgusting, man. It's one of these things that, people ask me what motivates me. Every time I talk about this, I don't lose any of this because it offends me. I'm from welfare and food stamps, man. I'm the American dream. I really am. I'm in a position now to work my ass off. You know what I mean? And I believe that if you have talent and you couple it with work ethic, you will be successful, whether you're a plumber, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a YouTuber. But they threaten that system by these shenanigans, these improprieties, these corruption, whatever you want to call it. They threaten that. They threaten the American dream, in my opinion. And so it's what drives me, because I'm sitting here talking to you, and it's like I'm back the day I read the complaint, getting pissed off again. You know what I mean? And I think they underestimated that there's a lot of people that feel the way Tony feels and the way that John feels. You know what I mean? And a lot of XRP holders, God bless you guys, man. You guys are motivate me. People say that what motivates me, you guys motivate me.
And now the number, if maybe you can give us the up-to-date number, it's over 65,000 at this point?
Yeah, it may hit 66. It'll probably hit 66,000 this weekend or this week. So it's steadily, at least a few hundred every week now. So if this case goes another year, it certainly would probably hit 75,000, if not 100.
Now, tomorrow, in fact, I'll be interviewing former SEC Commissioner Joseph Grunfest. And he was the one who sent a letter to Jay Clayton and the commissioners not to file this lawsuit because to all the things that you mentioned, it would look very bad, the optics, impropriety, and all these things. Is there anything that you would like me to ask him? And I know I'm asking this off the cuff. Obviously, I have my questions, and a lot of it will be around the ethics and so forth.
Yeah.
But if you were to, speak to him, what would you ask him?
I would. Well, one would be a kind of a personal question, which is, which I'm not saying you have to ask this, but I am a little curious how he feels about the fact that I got the letter, right? And that I fought for it. I got it. I published it on Crypto Law. It's become this, big thing. When he wrote that, I'm sure he didn't anticipate that 65,000 XRP holders would read it, right? Or that some lawyer would get up there. And so I am a little curious if what he thinks of that, just in general, is, his take on it, his interpretation of that. Does it bother him at all that his words are being, quoted so much, or how he thinks about it. But I would say to him, I would ask him, what I would do if I were asking him, I probably, and I'm sure he's read it, but, on page 24 of the SEC's opposition to us, I know you have that. If you could pull that up, right? And there's that one line that's on page 24, and I've cited it a lot on Twitter, but if you go down to like 3/4 of the way down, and you'll see a sentence right there. It's after an ID. It says the XRP traded even in the secondary market. Right there is the embodiment of those facts, circumstances, promises, and expectation. And today represents that investment contract. Right then and there, I would ask him, what does he think about this claim? Because you could tell him John Deaton, representing the 65,000 XRP holders, calls it absurd that secondary, it's set right there, secondary market sales. It's like the SEC is going with the theory of but for Ripple, was involved with XRP and helped create a secondary market. Therefore, all tokens are forever securities. It's akin to the oranges being securities, and it's akin to saying that all Bitcoin is an investment contract with Satoshi Nakamoto. Because Satoshi Nakamoto invented Bitcoin, he mined the first million Bitcoins, and he started, but for him, there would be no Bitcoin. So therefore, all Bitcoin. It's the functional equivalent of that. And Joseph Grunfest, a lot smarter than me. He's a very intellectual man. I would just be curious of what he thinks from a legal perspective. I'm not suggesting that you ask it because it might be too much in the weeds, with the viewers. But it offends me intellectually, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And also, I would probably talk to him about what Hester Peirce said to you. She said to you the first time you interviewed her that she spends time trying to get her colleagues at the SEC to not look at the token as the security, but the way it's offered and packaged and sold. And I would ask him, does he think that they do look at the token? Because that surprises me, because I think that's been the law. The law has always been the sales and the offering and the marketing and the packaging and the promises you make to investors, not the underlying asset, right? And so those are probably the things that I would ask, maybe even ask him about, according to Stephen Nayroff, who was the lawyer for ETH's ICO, he said that he worked with Joseph Grunfest, and Professor Grunfest was in a liaison between the SEC and him as an Ether. And I believe that he was a consultant for ETH, just like he's a consultant for XRP, for Ripple.
Right.
And I think that that's why his letter is so great, because it's not me or you, it's someone who helped ETH investors saying, hey, he's got nothing against Ethereum. And he's saying, yeah, I helped Ether, and I don't think today's ETH's a security, but I don't think XRP is a security either. And, you can't treat one way and treat the other another. So those are some of the probably things that I'd be curious, to think about. And of course, what you said, does he agree? In his letter, he said that bringing this case the way they did caused them to question the commission's discretion. The way he said it was causing to question the use of discretion by the commission. And then he also said the mass exodus of Berger and Clayton and Hinman and the trading markets director, that all of them leaving, that had never happened before. and it raised, quote, obvious concerns. I interpret obvious concerns and calling into question discretion as, this looks like you got an ulterior motive.
Right.
And then I probably would ask him, would he agree with us that it's in the SEC's best interest to have an investigation into the conflicts and into the appearances so that faith can be restored? You know what I mean? Like, I'd be curious if he supports that. And, listen, I'm sure that he thinks Jay Clayton is an honorable guy, and I'm sure that he probably thinks Bill Hinman, he's worked with them, but listen, what I say to people, and I'd say this to Joe Hall, I guarantee you there was someone who said, Bernie Madoff's a great guy. How many times does the people surprised that the neighbor is the murderer? Right? Oh, he's such a great guy. He helped me cut my grass, and he helps me do you don't know people, man, and you don't know what they're capable of or they're not capable of. And so, but good for you, man. I think that you're doing an amazing job, that you get these people. And, I want to say something else that I know, you know how Twitter is, Tony. Yeah. We can never please everybody, right?
Oh, no.
We can't, and people, like, I saw a couple of tweets about, that you didn't go after. That's not your job to go after Joe Hall, right?
Yeah.
Now your job might be to invite Deaton on with Joe Hall, right? But no, like, you're given a platform, and good job for you. You're getting these people. That's making news, man. And I look forward to listening to all your interviews.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you so much. And yeah, I can't argue or fight with them on an interview. It's just not the forum. I can try to ask as much as I can, but obviously could send things off the rails if I,
Well, you're not there to cross-examine them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not your role. It's just like, and like you said, your platform. Listen, if you were trying to, like, cross-examine every person about your own personal feelings, I know how you feel as passionate about these conflicts and improprieties as I do. Yep. You and I have talked about it on camera. You and I have talked about it off camera. But that's not your job, is to inflict, your own personal opinion and start, cross-examining people or challenging their opinion. You know what I mean? Your job is to say, okay, that's what he says. Let me get Deaton on and see what Deaton says about that.
Exactly. Bring all the perspectives to the table and let people make their judgment from there. And I think the facts will come out, and we'll see a lot of things are going to come to light, I think. And they're already starting to, with Empower Oversight, John, the work you're doing. So thank you as well.
No, absolutely. We're all playing our part, man. We're all playing our part. Decentralized justice, brother.
For sure. And that's a great way to put it. And it's just crazy what's happening in the world. Many things are getting disrupted because of decentralization. And like you said, justice as well, the legal aspect to it.
Absolutely. Who knew a bunch of Twitter sleuths and YouTubers, and combine that with a little bit, someone who has a law degree, and there's a lot of things we can accomplish.
For sure. I want to ask you a final question here, and get your thoughts. There's rumors, and actually there was a report today, a scoop, that the Biden executive order is coming soon. I spoke to the folks at Blockchain Caucus. They're saying it's not anticipated to be something negative, or rather Biden telling the different agencies to come together. Now, this may have implications for the SEC, because potentially the CFTC and the folks there who have been not in agreement with Gary Gensler and the SEC's enforcement by, I lost my train of thought, regulation by enforcement. Right. Do you think this could be a way where the SEC gets put guardrails around it and fixes some of the issues that we're seeing now?
Oh, absolutely. I think that what we need now is, with Biden saying that there needs to be this, I'm anticipating this, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm anticipating this executive order to be kind of late, like being one of those like, hey, almost get together, advise me what to do kind of executive order, not so much of devil in the details right now, right? I think that this should have come down a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Right. Of let's organize this, let's figure it out. But I think that that's really what it is that, it's gotten to the point where it's not a fad. It's not going away. You've got, for the first time, real people like billionaires talking about the potential, Bitcoin becoming a reserve asset for nations, not just corporations, right? And becoming legal tender in countries and things of that nature. Then you get into sanctions and whether or not they can be avoided through crypto or not. I think that they just need to understand the industry and the technology better. But now is where I think the CFTC can go with their jurisdictional grab. Gary Gensler has made his jurisdictional grab through the courtroom, through what you just said, regulation by enforcement, right? He's going to bring these cases to sort of like rush to the courthouse to establish jurisdiction. Here behind the scenes, hopefully the CFTC, hopefully other, companies and influential people, congressmen are all saying, senators saying, listen, this needs to be these cryptocurrencies, except for ICOs or except for extremely centralized, whatever type of technology they have, those are in the purview of the SEC. If someone's going to start a token and they're going to crowdfund, yes, the SEC has jurisdiction. But existing cryptocurrencies that have been trading for 10 years are more akin to a commodity today or a currency or commodity and less as a security, with an exception here or there, and that there is that kind of approach. And so hopefully that's happening. And I think it really is going to require, congressmen and senators, people like Senator Toomey, Warren Davidson, Darren Soto, Tom Emmer, people that understand this technology a little more than others. I think that they need to be pushing for that to be a CFTC controlled, or regulated industry.
Yeah, absolutely. John, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you again for all you're doing on behalf of XRP holders. And, I got to have you back on soon. Maybe we get the news from the judge next week or something. We'll schedule it.
I hope we get news soon, but there's going to be, what's going to happen in cases, just so you know, is that there's going to be this long waiting period like that we've been going through. And then at some point, whether that is April or May or July, I don't know what it's going to be, but there's going to be a lot of activity all at once. And the light's at the end of the tunnel. I know that there's people watching frustrated, but keep the faith. I think that the light's at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get there.
Awesome. John, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Keep doing a great job.